The music had already begun when everything in the room stopped for him. Because the girl in the corner, the one everyone pretended not to look at, the one hiding behind her long sleeves and lowered eyes, was silently crying. And the single-dad waiter, who'd been sweeping broken glass moments earlier, saw her trembling hands clutching the edge of the table as if the world had forgotten she existed. He didn't know her name. He didn't know she was the daughter of the wealthiest man in the hall. All he knew was that she looked exactly like his own daughter did the day she was released from the hospital, fragile, scared, trying desperately to shrink into herself. And before he could stop himself, he walked toward her. And the moment he did, the entire ballroom unknowingly shifted toward fate. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell more stories that heal. The night hadn't been easy for him. Ethan Reyes, 28 years old, single dad, part-time waiter, part-time mechanic, and full-time struggler, had arrived late to the event, after sprinting from the garage where he'd been fixing a client's broken-down van. His shirt was borrowed from his brother, too tight around the shoulders, and he'd barely had a moment to breathe before the banquet manager thrust a tray into his hands. Ethan needed the job. Between school fees, medical bills, and the rent that seemed to rise every other month, he couldn't afford to complain, but nothing prepared him for what happened when he saw her. Luna Caldwell, 18, daughter of billionaire hotel tycoon Marcus Caldwell. She had once been the star of dance competitions, a girl who twirled through life with lightness and grace until the fire. A terrible kitchen explosion at a charity event had left part of her face and torso scarred. Months of surgeries had saved her life but couldn't erase the damage. And even worse than the physical pain was the way people changed around her. Pitying eyes, forced smiles, and whispered questions about the poor girl who used to be so pretty. Tonight was the first time she had stepped back into a public event, but she hadn't lasted long before pushing herself into the shadows near the far wall, where she tried to disappear. Her father had been too caught up in speeches and business partners to notice her slipping away. Or perhaps he had noticed but didn't know how to approach her anymore. Their relationship had grown strained since the accident. He tried too hard, spoke too softly, hovered too anxiously, unable to bridge the gap between the girl she used to be and the girl she was struggling to accept. And so, Luna was alone, trembling, wincing whenever couples laughed on the dance floor. Ethan saw something in her that no one else seemed to. He knew the look of someone fighting invisible battles. His own daughter, Lily, had been born with a congenital heart condition, and for years he had watched her navigate fear, surgeries, loneliness, and pain no child should endure. When Luna shrank deeper into the corner, Ethan's instincts kicked in, not as a waiter, but as a father. He placed his tray down and walked over slowly, gently, as if approaching a wounded bird. He didn't intend to do anything more than check if she needed water or help, but as he drew closer, he saw her wiping tears with the back of her hand, pretending she wasn't. She flinched when she realized he'd noticed her crying, her shoulders stiffening defensively, her hair falling to one side to hide the right half of her face. She didn't speak, but her silence screamed louder than anything she could have said. In that moment, Ethan made a decision he didn't fully understand. He extended his hand, not professionally, not carefully rehearsed, but simply, humanly. She stared at it with confusion, then fear, then disbelief. The music, a soft, gentle piano melody, floated through the hall, and Ethan whispered the only words that felt right inside him. She couldn't hear him over the noise, but she felt what he meant. You deserve to dance. She shook her head. She thought he didn't know who she was, what she looked like, how people stared. She thought he was being polite, but Ethan didn't look at her scars. He looked at her eyes, eyes that carried months of self-hatred and isolation, eyes begging to feel normal again. When she took a shaky breath as if to refuse, his face softened with a father's patience. And somehow, impossibly, her trembling hand lifted and rested in his. They walked onto the dance floor. For a moment people stared. Some whispered. Her father froze mid-sentence, his drink half lifted to his mouth, and Luna felt the heat of dozens of eyes burning into her. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her scars, not treating her delicately, but treating her as if she were simply someone who wanted to dance. His movements were unpolished but earnest. He guided her gently, attentively, never forcing, never hesitating. And once she realized he wasn't embarrassed dancing with her, she loosened just enough to breathe. Then the song changed, a soft, emotional tune, the kind that wraps itself around a person like a warm blanket. Ethan recognized it instantly. It was the lullaby he used to play on the old radio when Lily had trouble sleeping in the hospital. A song about resilience, about learning to love yourself even when the world feels dark. His chest tightened. He didn't know why tears suddenly filled Luna's eyes, but he felt the shift inside her. She wasn't crying from sadness anymore. She was crying from relief. She rested her head lightly against his shoulder, just enough to feel supported, not enough to cross boundaries. She let herself sway, let herself forget the eyes around her, let herself be held, gently, respectfully, safely, across the room. Marcus Caldwell's world cracked open. He had spent every day praying for his daughter to feel alive again. He had tried therapy, expensive retreats, dermatology specialists, even art classes. But nothing restored the spark she'd lost. He watched from the doorway now, his usually stern eyes softening, his breath trembling. He couldn't understand who the waiter was or how he had reached her in a way others couldn't. He only knew that for the first time in months, his daughter was dancing. Not hiding, not pretending, dancing. When the song ended, Luna pulled away reluctantly. She looked at Ethan with wide, grateful eyes. He offered her a small nod, the kind only a parent who has known deep pain could give. She mouthed something, maybe thank you, but the words never fully formed. Then she returned to her father's side, while Ethan went back to clearing tables, ignoring the stares of the wealthy guests and returning to his life as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed for the rest of the night. Marcus couldn't stop glancing at the young waiter, the man who had stepped into his daughter's silent world without fear or hesitation. The man who didn't know her name, her status, her scars, but saw her, truly saw her. After the event, Marcus approached Ethan outside near the parking lot. But instead of anger or suspicion, he held something else in his gaze, a quiet, heavy gratitude. He thanked Ethan in a voice thick with emotion, surprising him. Ethan simply nodded and smiled politely, assuming it ended there. It didn't. The next morning, while Ethan was preparing Lily's breakfast, there was a knock on his apartment door. He expected a neighbor. Instead, he found Marcus Caldwell himself standing in the dim hallway, holding a business card in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Marcus didn't waste time. He explained that he wanted to help Ethan, offering him a job at one of his hotels, better pay, better hours, and benefits that could cover his daughter's medical needs. Ethan refused at first. He didn't want charity. But Marcus insisted, saying it wasn't charity, it was repayment. Ethan had given his daughter something priceless, courage, hope. A night where she remembered what it felt like to be seen without judgment. Ethan eventually accepted, not for himself, but for Lily. In the weeks that followed, Luna began to attend physical therapy again. She stepped outside more often. She started sketching dancers in her notebook, imagining movements she once believed she'd never perform again. And Ethan saw her occasionally during his shifts at the hotel, always in passing, always brief, but always with a quiet connection between them. They began exchanging small smiles, nods of recognition, gentle acknowledgments of the impact they had on each other's lives. Months later, at a charity event hosted by Marcus, Luna approached Ethan more confidently than before. She wasn't the same fragile girl hiding behind her hair. She had begun to rebuild herself bit by bit, and she knew exactly who had helped her take that first step. She thanked him properly this time, her voice steady yet emotional. And Ethan, humble as always, told her she had done the hardest part, fighting her way back. But the most emotional moment came when Lily, now healthier, stronger, and full of energy, ran up to Luna and hugged her without fear or hesitation. "Children don't judge scars, they see hearts," Luna cried as she hugged her back. Marcus watched from a distance once more, his eyes wet with the same tears he'd shed that night in the ballroom. Except this time, they weren't tears of shock. They were tears of pride, joy, healing. He realized something powerful. Sometimes miracles don't arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a tired, overworked single dad whose heart is big enough to heal someone he barely knows. Because kindness doesn't need wealth, compassion doesn't need status, and courage can come from the most unexpected places. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional, and inspiring stories to life. Before the ending, special request, comment below. Kindness can change a life. Let's spread positivity together. And as the lights of the ballroom eventually dimmed in memory, one truth remained forever bright in the hearts of everyone who witnessed that moment: a single dance, offered without fear or judgment, can save someone who has forgotten how to feel whole. Sometimes the most broken hearts are healed not by people who have everything, but by people who have nothing except empathy and courage. And that night, the world learned that even a single dad waiter could teach a billionaire, a scarred girl, and an entire room what true beauty looks like. It looks like kindness. It looks like compassion. It looks like one brave dance.